made up. I'm not. Kind of want to go higher, but I kind of don't. Like, I do and I don't. Anyways, so we need to get a couple of things made up here. Which I need a workshop for, because I gotta get some more portable miners set up. Each Mark II requires 2 of these. 3 iron nodes. Oh no, I need more frames. You, not 2 of you. I only need 1. Thank you. Jeez. I've been good. Aside from, losing all my stuff the other day. Oh, it was so bad. Like, I didn't exactly rage quit, but I was like, I need to get away from Minecraft for a little bit and just need to do something else. I think I had somewhere around, like, maybe 6, 7 shulkers of stuff on me. Like, I had 2 shulkers of magma blocks. I had, like, 2 shulkers of gravel. The Frank stuff, I lost the pick. I lost the boots. I lost the sword. Well, technically both swords, because I had them combined. I mean, the OP items weren't that bad, because, I mean, the pick's not that expensive. And the boots, while they were nice, I mean, they're not really, like, needed. So, I did lose quite a bit, but I'm not, like, overly distraught. I can get it all back pretty easy. It was just the situation. I was like, I need to not be playing this game right now. I'm gonna make this stuff actual concrete. Oh, it is, but, Feather Falling 4 still isn't nothing. So. I have extras. No. Where did I leave all my tickets? Still in here. That's not the ticket. Did I do it? I don't think I ever pulled them out of the, link. Okay, I need 1 of you, and 1 of you. Apparently you need power to give me tickets. Yes, give me tickets. You give me stuff. I haven't been back on the server since. It's been 4 days, 5 days. Why you no let me pick you? Weird. It's probably doesn't want me to. I mean, the thought's appreciated, but I don't really like accepting donation type things. And it's nothing personal with anybody. I'm a rookie. I don't know. I've never been one to be like, oh, sure, I'll take this off of you, and I'll take that off of you. It's just, I've always been the type that I want to get everything myself. Or at the very least, compensate whoever it is for what they're doing. Why are you always picking on Maruki? Are you still Mark 1? Yeah. Mark 2. You know, it's really a shame that I can't just, like, click an upgrade. Oh well, it is what it is. I'm stuck. That's some good time traveling, because I didn't start streaming until like 20 minutes ago. Yes. You suck it. Okay. I want. Hey, I can do all of that. Either cat wants. I want third. I like these. These are good. Total 9. Okay. I'll get that. Just use the last ticket. Buy all the things. That would require having a netherite block. Why do you need a netherite block? You're just trying to scam a netherite block out of somebody? Or is there some achievement that involves a stack of them? Armor Shrine. Button was it? No, not that button. Ah, that's what it is. Knew there was a change. Oh, I don't want to take base elevator down to read. Yeah, so I have a webcam that's on my monitor, and all it does is tracks motion. So like when I move my head or when I talk, avatar boost. I want to get, there's a thing called a leap motion controller. And what the leap motion controller does is it actually like tracks hands and fingers and stuff. Like if I lift my hand up, then you know the VTuber's hand will raise, twiddle fingers. I like the leap motion stuff that goes with it. I want some. Ah. Build. The hub's gonna stay here just a little bit. I made her myself. I still need to do a little bit extra with the rigging, but I haven't put the extra time in to figure out just how I want to do the kawaii is Japanese. Usually used to mean something is cute. Maruki's being a weeb. Oh my. Ban King Obvious. No JoJo in chat. I'm not a fan of JoJo. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Yes, it is an anime. And in my opinion, it is a garbage anime. No JoJo. The only JoJo I want to hear about is Mojo JoJo. Oh, cooperate with me. Thank you very much. Platform. I'm gonna need to put guardrails. That's gonna be a long fall. No, not really, because like within animes there are rom-coms and movies and stuff, so in fact most animes that I generally watch are rom-coms. Like I used to watch a lot of the shonen stuff, but eh, reaches a point where you watch one and you've pretty much seen them all. Like, I think the last one I watched was yes, anime is very addictive. Am I? I'm up concrete. Uh, you were such a troll. What did you do? What the? Oh no. Um, hello. I would like to undo that, please. Heck. Why won't you let me remove the timeout? There we go. What did you do? Apparently, Stream Elements did not like something you tried typing. Wow. It still shouldn't have timed you out for that long. That's crazy. I think I'm gonna get rid of the. Alright, I gotta find the setting for the ad. Uh, excuse me, quit. I think I clicked something I shouldn't have. I was in my dashboard and I saw something about ads pop up. Clicked on it to go away. I have no idea where the thing is for the ads. Sure. Can I not find... Yeah, privilege. Did I find it? Subscriptions. Um. Okay. So I think I have the ads. I think. Not making any promises here, but I think I got them. Studio Ghibli. Uh, yeah, not my thing. Like the only one I can really watch that's Studio Ghibli is Princess Mononoke. Yes, there is always that one weapon. Like weapon like that, a lot of people don't understand that um, if it doesn't make a whole lot of sound and you're good at like stealth and hiding, people aren't really gonna find you very easily. Is that 13? That is a very odd number, and I don't like that. No, not you, not you. Yeah, just because it has the one shot doesn't mean that it's a terrible weapon. It just means that you've got to like know how to lead targets, stuff like that. But I can't do games like Battlefield. Mm-mm. I can't. Every time I tried, I end up rage quitting. Blah. I missed one. I was using a 20x scope and a headshot a guy that was parachuting like five. Oh, jeez. You know, there's nothing worse than being like a sitting duck in that situation. A lot of people don't realize just how open you are when it's that kind of thing. Because if you're like a parachuter falling, there's not a whole lot you can do to like dodge or maneuver in most games. Better with the bows than the guns. Mm. Don't you? I don't want you in the pillar. Yeah. It, it has to connect foundation? That's weird. I know it had to. Um, oh, oh, eh, yeah. Oh, I meant vertical. All the way down. Thank you. Work on. No, you won't. But now, can this look? Why? Yeah, that's kind of nice. Oh no. It's jumping off. This is gonna be annoying to build. uh, there are. Yeah, it thinks I'm in the way. But yeah, there's jump pads and stuff. Okay. Almost 8,000 flights of stairs. Almost there. Everything's in the way. Close as that. Oh, just barely off. Ah, why? It's because of where it started. Actually, if I was smart, I probably could have started it here. You know. How close is that? Close, but not where I wanted to start. Ah! Ah! Okay, you're gonna go, you're gonna... Like... So all the colors, like the blue like that tells me that it's fine. When it's yellow, it's warning me that it might be overlapping something else, as far as, like, clearance goes. And when it's red, that means you can't place it. So, like, if you look in the center between, like, right below the materials, it says a player is in the way. Use conveyor belt. I mean, I could. I could use conveyor belt. But I really don't want conveyor belts. Because they are a huge pain to try and get to line up like that. Yeah, but I can't put flowers on them. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't put flowers on them. You're not. or there-ish. Need to pull it back. They said to delete you. I appreciate the vote of confidence. You know what? That's close enough. It doesn't need to be surgical. Oh, no. No, no. Yep. Oh, this is much easier going down. I just gotta try and not fall to my death. Yeah. So the guardrails, I'm not terribly worried about on the stairs. I'm more worried about the guardrails on top. Going up the stairs, I can just, like, put pillars. Okay, maybe I should. Shush! Shush! All the stairs. So many stairs. So what I'll do later is there's walls in here. And in I can I think I can buy them. No, I can't do it quite yet. So there's glass walls that I can make. If only. If only. Nope, actually what I'll probably do get down a little easier. And properly. There's these hyper tubes, and there's also this little jelly landing pad. What am I missing? No math. It's essentially a slime block. big old like cylinder of goo. But I need biomass in order to make it. Or what I can also get, which I don't have any on me. There's parachute in the game. I'll probably put some hypertubes around, but I want at least one stairwell in case like the power goes out. Oh, you can launch yourself super far with them. Okay, I thought I had some parachutes made. No. But yeah, so hypertubes. Me, I would like to build something now. You're not gonna let me actually go vertical, are you? No, it's gonna be. Maybe if I use this. I angle this to. I can. Oh, now that I just tried crushing myself. So I take the support. Work. Oh, that's what I did. Delete the floor. The entrance. Oh, I need to have something up there first. Now, this should do once I get a pipe on there. Go all the way up to the top. Way to the top. Top. Hmm. 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 Hey, you get to sit like that, because apparently I did not take into consideration the fact that I'm going to need a lot of copper. Jump over to that one. Uwu is like a term that's used for things that are. Oh, what's the best way to describe it? Like cutesy thing. Steel pipe. I don't know. Is Maruki a cute anime girl? I mean, I like her avatar. Her avatar's cute in Minecraft. And at the end of the day, the only person's opinion that matters is mine. Ow. Them's fighting words. Are you gonna take this abuse, Maruki? Ankle hurt. What'd you do to your ankle? Eh, halfway up. Is she? Is she a liar? You are getting awfully defensive there. I think there might be some truth to that if you're getting that defensive. Silence! I kill you! Fish dies by its own. I can't say I've heard that before. It is a road barrier. How very observant of you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, where's my Yeah, it's not going to stay the road barrier. Oh, iron. Yeah, it's just something temporary, so if I'm walking backwards, I don't fall off and die. Because that's never fun. I should shop one of these. Oh no! And you know, that's not really that much of a shocker. Banana bread is. $200. Banana bread is good. I might check it out. I have this very strict policy of you can't unsee stuff. I've had people be like, "Oh, you should go check this out." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." And then I go check it out, and I am horribly scarred for life. Like a roommate going, "You should check out Two Girls, One Cup." And I'm like, eh? And like, "You have to." But I don't really want to. Like, "You should, it's cool." And then they brought it up on somebody else's computer, and they're like, "Watch this!" And I'm like, "Okay, fine." And now, because of that video, I don't click on links anymore. It is very much something that is not family friendly. In no shape or form is it family friendly. To power. That did not hurt as much as I thought it was going to. It does need power. Tryptophobia? No. I think most of that stuff is gross, but it's not a phobia. Meow, meow, meow. That's neat. Um, it does make me like the sight of this stuff is disgusting, but like I don't get nauseous or anything super extreme. Yeah, it's fine. Blurp, blurp. Yeah, I know some people get like super just like grossed out, and in some cases nauseous. Into the glue. I'm seeing things. That or an eidetic memory. Eidetic memory would suck. I do not have a photographic or an eidetic memory. An eidetic memory. Somebody with an eidetic memory remembers every detail of every minute of their life. Sight, sound, smell, everything. They can completely recall every sensory response that they've had through their entire life. Like, they could walk past a building and tell you how many bricks were in the building, even though they only saw it once and for 5 seconds. What is this now? 20? Oh, Mark 2 should work. You food association. The first time I watched an Indiana Jones movie, I was eating salmon and corn on the cob while sitting on the floor. Again. Oh, I shouldn't have did that yet. I have no storage up top. I need to get power. Look, I've got power up here now. Oh, yeah. I thought that was going to happen. uh... Ew. I should have known that was going to kill me. Yes, died. Now I gotta go pick up my stuff. No, no death commands for me. I do interactive stuff, but usually not to that extent. I would baby rage. And you're up there. I can go in there. Don't need all that on me. Never used a rebar gun. I've heard of it. I've never watched it. Power it. And now I shouldn't die going up and down. I have seen a couple of the Harry Potter movies. I think they're terrible movies. I think J.K. Rowling is a piece of human garbage. And I refuse to support anything that she does. Fish sticks with Batman Return. I would say mashed potatoes are one of my more coveted foods. Danny DeVito and Michelle Pfeiffer? I want to say that's her name. Is Pfeiffer? Yeah, that one still should have been Michael Keaton. You know his name is not actually Michael Keaton. That's just his stage name. When he got into acting, he had to change it. Almost done with platform. First celebrity crush. That is his name. A lot of people don't know that. You know, I don't know. I mean, I would have to say I hate to say it, but probably Jessica Alba. That's right. Go eat a banana. Do you have a thing against bananas being obvious? Ooh, yeah. Bruce Willis is a good one. Yeah. She was such a good actress. Oh, you're so young. She is cute though. Um, I mean, if we're talking something more TV show though, like I figured you were thinking more like movie celebrities. Um, I would have to say probably, and I just had to look this one up because I always forget her last name. Um, Allison Hannigan. Well, I mean, I figured that was the gist of it because I mean, it's not like it's ever gonna happen. Melissa and Amanda Tapping. Can't say I'm familiar with either of them. Yes, first name basis. The tapping. I'm gonna have to. Stargate. Yeah, I don't know if I would say best. I think best is a little bit of a stretch. Materials up. Start in one corner. YouTuber crush. Um, I didn't even learn who Pokimane was until like recently. Hmm. Hey, I'm not gonna down some good thigh, but sacrilege, in my opinion. Oh, I'm very much not a PG streamer, Murky. I'm not worried about that. Just, don't get too wild with it. My streams are very much marked mature. I forgot to change it back to Zoom. I need to come this way. Keep it TVMA. These are all spitting out at 120. Nothing below the belt. Everything is fair. Makes me think of Celebrity Deathmatch. Really wish I could see up there. Hey, flashlight. That's a novel idea. I forgot I had a flashlight. Flashlights are useful if you remember about them. Okay. I'm gonna need to make this wider, so you're gonna have to go somewhere. I'm pretty sure that's a few more than 420 lumens. That's gotta be at least, somewhere in a couple thousand range. If you can have that bright of a light that far away, that's a little more than 420. You'd go away. Let's start here. What? Oh, don't tell me poopy. There we go. I forgot to change the direction of these. Hate Netflix because they mark things that have nudity or violence. They are required to do that. They have no choice in the matter. Oh. You know, to be honest, I'm surprised it even has that one scene. So it's the first episode that has it, and because it's there, the whole series is marked. Yeah, that's all. I moved this one. Yeah, good to you. Too much work. Mark it all. Not quite 90, but whatever. It's close enough. I can't say I'm terribly surprised. Because, like, the movie itself really, like, you know, there are other ways to find things with nudity in it. Yeah. He's probably one of those people that likes Game of Thrones. Taking candy from a grown ass man. Personal opinion, the show was dumb. I couldn't get into it. It was way too much just pointless sex. That seems to be HBO. Like, if you're gonna watch anything on HBO, you might as well expect there to be sex scenes for no reason. Other than them to be there. Because that's HBO. Why are you not cooperating with me, sir? Maruki! Maruki! Ooh. Ooh, Big Bang Theory was a good show. Jim Parsons is I wish he did more. I think the last thing I saw him in was what was the name of that movie? The only big names in it were Jim Parsons and Kevin Costner. And it was about. It wasn't like a complete documentary, but it was based off of a real life story with NASA. Hidden Figures is the name of the movie. Hidden Figures is with Kevin Costner. It's got Kirsten Dunst, Jim Parsons, and a few other actors that I'm terrible with names, but like as soon as you saw them, you'd be like, "Oh yeah, I know her." Octavia Spencer being one of them. But the movie is fantastic. All of the smelters. I don't line these up. So how many can you handle? 30. Got. I need 4 per. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12. Hi, Copper. How's it going? Doing some factory building. You did tell me that he cries. Show some tears. Tears always get you what you want. Not quite, but you can try. I want manifold. I'm good. Very tired because I didn't get a lot of sleep. I'm one of those that once I'm awake, I can't go back to sleep till. Oh, that is terrible. Well, hopefully you don't have anything too important that you've got to worry about today. Missed. Okay. What was that one? 4, so you need to change location. Yeah. Oh. Connect all the belts. Nothing left to watch. I'm just gonna go to bed. Why are you T-shaped? Go in there because I hate having my inventory full of random crap. No, not conveyor pole. Want the pole. I mean, want the pole, not that pole. Just Chill J hoping to build on Joker's modded server. He's just open. Yeah, I saw the server that. Well, I saw the pack. Grim posted a link to what the pack is. It looks neat. I was hoping something a little more modded when they were talking about a modded server, but. Or... Don't feel like sleeping today. You're too tired. I'll let you in on a little secret here. That's kind of what you want to happen so you can... Not sure if you're aware of that. Or... Yeah, that's good. That is a very weird. Oh no, that looks right. So my personal favorites are Techopolis and Cuboid Outpost. I have played Ragnamod for a little bit. Just didn't give it enough time to get into it. I think adding in Tinker's Construct would have been good for him. Because it's not like super modded. But still kind of has that Minecraft feel to it a little bit. And Vault Hunters is like a huge kitchen sink pack. But Iskal and the rest of the dev team they did a fantastic job. Oh, I went over. This is gonna hurt. Oh. Another streamer that I watch, they've got a community server that they're going to be putting together for Vault Hunters. I think I'll be joining that one later. I am super excited about that. After playing Diablo, I don't think I could do Vault Hunters solo. Wrong. You don't like shotguns? What's wrong with shotguns? Vault Hunters is a very, very beefy pack. I've got a pack that I have running on my own personal hardware for some friends. Somewhere around like, I think we're up to like 280 mods on it. Something like that. But the main ones on it are Create and Tinker's Construct, just because they still wanted to really keep like the Minecraft feel to it. But I decided to go with the biomes you'll go, because a lot of people like to have the extra building materials. So the mod pack is really geared towards people that are builders. How do I want to do the power? I want them from? Or do I want them behind? A 20-inch ultra wide 40 or $200 40-inch. Jeez. I'm not a terribly big fan of the ultra wides. I have one, but right now it's not hooked up because I haven't gotten around to putting the mount up for it. But it's strictly just going to be used for different chats, Discord or stream. Other than that, I've just got 227. Down the box over front. Yeah, I want to say they're 27-inch. I've got two 27-inch monitors, and then I've got a 37-inch TV. Well, I don't ever have anything spanning across the two, so the gap doesn't bother me any. think I'm gonna bring power up. Right? Under it. Yeah, it's, I don't know what it is. Like, it's something about the ultra wides that they just, I don't know, they look weird. Like, I think a 40-inch wouldn't be too bad. Yeah, that is definitely true. That has been the whole purpose of screensavers since they were put in place. It's not as big of an issue now. Like LCDs, it still happens with LCD and LED TVs, but it was really the old CRTs. The old CRTs, they would get some bad burn in. Plasma is even worse. Hey, I think this might work for what I want. Yeah. Phone has screen burn in. I see Discord in the top right corner constant. How did you get it on your phone? That just seems crazy to me. How did you manage to do that one? Good night, Maruki. Keep well. I want you to not be single. I want you to be a double. Change. That's not quite where I wanted you. But I suppose that worked. Jeez. You know, Discord still works. Oh, I can't do that the way I wanted to. So yeah, Discord still works when the screen is off. It's not like you had to leave your phone open. Okay, let's see if that works. I am hoping so. Are you going to power this like I want? It does work the way I want it to. Yeah, I suppose. Oh, right. I'm a dirt. I forgot to set all the rest of these to get. I help with them producing ingots. No, wrong button. Oh, look at all that smog. Like it's LA. Okay. You need a bunch of them producing all kinds of stuff. Me, sir? You... Okay, you're stuck over there. Okay, you are. That's 360 ingots. And... Schmoggity smoke, sloppity slop. Oh, I upgraded my power. So now, way over there, there are 24 coal generators over by a lake. Yeah, that wire runs off to a power plant that's right here. That's a small power plant. I'll be doing better later. Now we need... Check recipes real quick. So... Screws, I need iron rod. 15 to 50. I know I'm going to need a lot of screws. I need iron rods, but I don't need the rods really as modular frames, rods and plates, reinforced plates. Reinforced plates are screws and plates. Lots of screws. We need to get these going. I do have auto mod set a little high, just because I never have actual moderators. I don't want anything too offensive getting through. Oh, that was a little more spicy than I thought it was going to be. I do have a Discord. Not many people in it, but I do have one. Pipe. Screws. No? Must be a general permissions thing. Where are my settings here? Rolls. That's why. I wonder if the screenshots are the same way. Why is my profile so bright? Whoa. Why is my profile so bright? It shouldn't be that bright. That's weird. I have no idea why. I mean, yours is fine if I click on you. Yeah, it's only mine. That's weird. Okay, the others should be fixed. There we go. I've never noticed the little shutter on that. Oh, the space giraffe. There we go. Should be able to see the voice channel. Next speak video. Yeah, should be good now. Yeah, I haven't done a whole lot of work on the Discord. This is putting out 30. Iron rods are 15 per, so I need 2 constructors per. This is gonna take a lot of construction. Where do I want to lay them? I really don't want to move that again. But I may, because I've got that tube set up. Yeah, I'm just gonna move. Select all the things. Except maybe the one that I'm standing on. That probably would be the best idea. Not the one I'm standing on. Thank you very much. Around. You. Now. That hole in. And. All the constructors. Still over there freaking out. Here. Can't upload to the screenshot. Manage. And files, actions, stickers, no at, manage. It should be good now. Oh, jeez. I need to make a memes channel. Why didn't you build? There, please. Thank you. What am I missing? Nothing. Please. all the things. I need more tower. I need more power poles. Up. Up, let me up. Up, up. Got 12 there. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Nine, 11, 12. Oh, I missed. It's 4 a.m. I'm gonna eat dinner. Oh, you are off. Not lined up, sir. Should be what? Yeah, this one should have those two. One, 2, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12. Why do I get the feeling that yep. There, 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 there. Nope, 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 nope. Damn it. Damn it. Wait. That one's off. I missed. In. 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 All the conveyor belts. Oh, I missed one. Give me one more right. Okay. Two. Rod. 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 Thank you. Rod. So if I'm doing, yeah, I didn't need that many. So 1, 2, 4. I need the first 8 to be. 1, 2, 5, 6, 8. Rod. Nope, nope. Rod. Probably should have came through it. Whatever. It is what it is. I actually don't need quite as many doing the plates as I thought. Wait. 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 These four actually don't even need to be here. Salty, straight out of the can corn with dragons race to the edge. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. I did not think this through. Oh no. Okay, so I have iron ore coming up, and it's being split amongst all of this over here into these smelters. The smelters then turn it all into iron ingots, which is these. These constructors are then taking those ingots and they're going to turn them into rods. This side over here, these ones are going to turn the ingots into plates. In the middle, I'm going to have some more that will take and turn the rods, like a random constructor. It'll take the rods and turn them into screws. Unfortunately, no. Most of the ingots will get processed as soon as they are made.